In Tampa, Florida, 12-year-old Rocky Almastica Jr. never has to go far for attention after his parents call it quits.
Rocky's parents were divorced, but they shared custody and lived very close to each other.
The household change is easy on him until his mom takes on more hours at work.
Because of Rocky's mother's busy schedule, he ended up moving in with his father full-time.
He started experimenting with drugs, and he also picked a lot of fights with other kids in school.
After a divorce, children tend to think that the divorce is about them, and so they do not know how to express their feelings in terms of, do I take my mother's side, do I take my father's side? And so in order to manage the anxiety of that, they begin to act out.
Over the next 3 years, Rocky sprouts into a handsome young man, but his deviant behavior remains the same.
Rocky ended up getting arrested a few times, vehicle theft, burglary, and drug possession.
But after a few months of good behavior in juvie, the 15-year-old is released and quickly goes back to his old ways.
Something you gotta tell me? No. There is something.
At their wits' end, his parents enroll him in an alternative institute as a last-ditch effort to turn his life around.
You're killing me. Take this letter, you read it. You're gonna talk to me later.
And the first week in the new program proves to be a success when he manages to keep out of trouble.
This program seemed to be stimulating Rocky, and for the first time, he can't wait to get to school.
It doesn't hurt that the attractive teen is wildly distracted with the opposite sex.
Rocky seemed to thrive, at least among the student population. He was very popular with the young ladies there.
All of this attention from these girls, it gives him a place to put his anxiety. And so now he's being seen as a desirable, and he's loving the attention.
He's already got his eye on someone special when he meets 15-year-old beauty Emily Clemens.
I think Emily caught Rocky's eye because she was a very pretty girl. She was blonde, great smile, and he just really was drawn to her.
Like Rocky, Emily was going to the school because she could not function at a traditional school.
She did spend some time dealing with some criminal charges that she had against her.
In the coming weeks, the two never run out of conversation.
They got along well. They were two peas in a pod, you could say.
Within a few months, Emily is in love and Rocky is infatuated, and he doesn't wait long to take things to the next level.
Things got very heated between the two of them rather quickly. There was a lot of passion between the two.
But after 6 months of gambling with unprotected sex, Rocky finds out Emily is pregnant.
Emily was overjoyed. This is something that could tie the two together forever. As for Rocky, he's more afraid. He didn't want to be tied down with her.
They keep their little secret hidden from their parents until they can decide what to do.
So awesome, we're gonna have a baby.
But before Emily starts to show, she miscarries.
Emily was devastated. She really wanted a baby, and she really wanted a baby with Rocky.
But losing the baby is the least of Emily's concern after her exceedingly inquisitive mom pries their secret out of her.
Are you pregnant?
Emily's mother is livid. She sends her out of the state to live with her father just to get Emily away from Rocky. She feels like she's being torn from the love of her life.
As Emily's world crumbles, the now 16-year-old Rocky doesn't give the sudden breakup a second thought.
Rocky wasn't as upset as Emily. To him, Emily was out of sight, out of mind.
Rocky may have liked Emily, but he certainly wasn't ready to be a father. And so with her being sent away, he didn't really have to deal with the idea of losing a child and seeing her every day.
Single life doesn't stick well for the heartthrob when another classmate, 16-year-old Laisha Landrum, lures him in with her boisterous personality.
Laisha is feisty. She speaks her mind. She's the leader of the pack. Girls want to be liked by her, while guys want to date her.
But she only has eyes for one guy. And in just a few short weeks, Rocky falls for her harder than ever before.
She initiated everything. She was the leader in the relationship, and he followed. This may have been the first time he was in love.
Rocky loved the attention from Laisha. He loved her domineering and strong personality.
But sex and love quickly corner Rocky in a familiar situation.
Just a few months after they got together, Laisha becomes pregnant.
This isn't new for him in terms of the experience, but this time, because he loves Laisha and wants to be with Laisha, he's excited about the news.
Oh, yeah.
But their happiness is shot down when the young couple tells their families the news.
Laisha's parents were less than pleased, and they told her if she wanted to have a baby, it wasn't going to be under their roof.
She's shattered by her family's merciless decision until her boyfriend steps in to pick up the pieces.
So Rocky took control, and he moved Laisha in with he and his father.
And when Rocky's mom agrees to take care of the child care costs, he and Laisha are able to stay in school.
Rocky's parents weren't happy, but they supported them as much as they could.
Laisha became more vulnerable because she was actually living with Rocky and they were living this adult life. And so she really saw him as a provider to take care of her needs.
9 months later, they welcome a baby girl into the world. But just 3 weeks into fatherhood, life throws Rocky another curveball. His old flame, Emily, moves back into town to live with her mom.
Although Emily had been gone for the better part of a year, when she moved back to Tampa, she still had very, very strong feelings for Rocky.
When she discovered that Laisha was now in the picture, and she was very upset and very jealous of Rocky's new woman.
But knowing that Rocky had a new girlfriend and a baby didn't stop her for 1 second from contacting him.
Determined to win him back, Emily tells him she wants to see him alone. The 16-year-old has the opportunity to step away from domestic life when he agrees to meet her without his girlfriend knowing.
She immediately hoped to pick up that connection she had with Rocky again.
They'd meet up and hang out. There was always this strong bond that the two had. Rocky would routinely speak with Emily on the phone and text messages.
You would think he would not risk his relationship with Laisha, but he was 16 years old and all he had on his mind were girls.
This was probably exciting for Rocky, and he thought it was harmless.
But what seems like a fun distraction is adding fuel to a rapidly growing fire.
Emily was very infatuated with Rocky, calling him at all hours of the day, text messages. Laisha knew that Emily and Rocky had a very strong relationship, and even though they had broken up, she had the suspicion that Rocky was still seeing Emily on the side.
But when Emily impulsively spills the explicit details to a friend, the scandal travels like wildfire.
Laisha begins to hear rumors at school that Rocky and Emily have hooked up numerous times behind her back. She was mad, she was furious, and she eventually confronts Rocky.
Why did Lindsay tell me you're talking to a girl named
But
Emily?
Rocky's quick to deflect the blame.
Delete her number.
He told Laisha that Emily was basically stalking him, that she was obsessed with him, and that he brushed her off completely and was ignoring her.
Laisha does not believe him.
There was a lot of fighting, there was a lot of arguing, there was a lot of mistrust.
No, I'm not lying.
And it's not over until she has the last word.
Laisha makes it clear to Rocky she has to be the only girl in his life.
Rocky clearly loves Laisha, and he likes Emily. However, the position that Laisha put him in made him realize where his loyalties lied and who he really wanted to be with.
Terrified at the thought of losing Laisha, Rocky makes his choice known.
Rocky tried to put an end to his second relationship with Emily, and then he stopped responding to any of her calls and texts. Emily did not take no for an answer. She continued to call and text Rocky.
Emily was already vulnerable because they never had a finality to their relationship, but it backfired on him because he had never dealt with consequences before of being a player.
But Rocky's radio silence doesn't stop his phone from blowing up a couple of days later.
Why is Emily calling you?
I don't know.
Emily called Rocky, and Laisha picked up the phone, and she made it extremely clear she wanted Emily to stay away from Rocky.
Stop calling.
It's the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Stay away from him because it's
When Laisha finds out that Emily is still trying to involve herself with Rocky, she's furious.
over it.
Laisha has had enough.
He's mine.
The young mom wants the deceptive communications between her boyfriend and his ex to stop.
I don't know if she intended for Emily to die, but Laisha wanted to stop her advances towards Rocky.
It was par for the course for Rocky. He probably wanted to make sure that Laisha knew that he would be there for her and that he would defend her honor.
After Rocky's dad leaves for work that night, Rocky speaks to Emily on her cell phone. Shortly after their conversation, Emily sets out for Rocky's apartment.
Emily lied to her mom, told her she was going to the mall.
And she caught a bus over to Rocky's apartment.
Meanwhile, Laisha takes their baby to the sitter's house and returns home to Rocky. Later that evening, there's a knock at the front door. Outside, Emily is waiting.
Rocky opened the door for Emily, and instead of seeing Rocky alone, she's face to face with Laisha.
Laisha grabbed her, punched her, hit her as hard as she could. Rocky watched the two girls fighting, but he was hesitant to jump in.
As Rocky closes the door, Emily has no way out but to fight back.
Emily's survival instincts kicked in full force. She's able to put up a fight with Laisha.
Rocky wanted to be there for Laisha, so when she asked for his help, in that moment, he chose to help her to let her know that he was choosing her.
Rocky sets his nerves aside to back up the mother of his child in the malicious struggle.
Hit her again!
Rocky punched her over and over again.
The couple never lets up, even as Emily stops fighting back.
Rocky and Laisha hit Emily with everything they could get their hands on. A steel pot, they hit her so hard the handles broke off. They also took a boombox and hit her in the face.
They struck her 35 times.
She desperately gasps for air until Laisha grabs a nearby hammer and takes the final strike.
While Emily was laying face down on the floor, Laisha took the hammer and turned it around and used the claw part and hit her in the head.
Emily is bleeding profusely and her skull is cracked. Rocky and Laisha thought Emily was dead.
It's possible that Rocky didn't realize what he'd done, so he thought that this is what he had to do for his family.
Realizing they don't have a plan for her body, Rocky panics and calls a friend, Troy Denton, who lives in the building.
When Troy came in and he saw Emily's body on the floor bleeding everywhere, he said, "I want nothing to do with this." And despite Rocky's pleading and begging for him to help, he said no and just left.
An hour after the beating, the pair quickly wraps Emily in a comforter and carry her outside to the back of the building, disguised as a piece of waste.
Then Rocky and Laisha put her in the dumpster because they did not know what to do with her.
They gathered all the bloody items, took it to the dumpster, and piled it on top of Emily's body.
Rocky and Laisha didn't care. They had no regard for her human life at all, for her life at all. They just threw her away like garbage.
Believing their problems are buried, the murderous couple turns in for the night. But their careless string of events are anything but resolved. Downstairs, Troy's still reeling from the sight of Emily's bloody body, unsure if she was alive or dead.
This is blood.
When Troy got back to his apartment, he was just absolutely mortified. He told his girlfriend Kayla everything that he saw.
Concerned, the troubled couple goes outside towards Rocky's unit to see if they can get a better grip on the situation.
When they walked by that dumpster, they heard what sounded like an animal and some kicking and grunting noises coming from the dumpster. When they realized that there was probably someone in there, that it had to be a person, they immediately called 911.
What is your emergency?
Within 3 minutes, first responders arrive to a shocking discovery.
They noticed that she was breathing, she was still alive. They got her out of the dumpster. They discovered that she was unconscious. They could not communicate with her.
The 16-year-old's chances of survival are grim. She's rushed to the hospital, where she's put on life support. After she's identified from the ID found in her pocket, Emily's parents get the most horrific phone call of their lives.
It's unfathomable for those parents. They could not recognize their child. To see their teenage daughter in that condition had to be heartbreaking.
12 hours after being beaten, Emily Clemens is unable to hold on any longer. While her parents mourn their sudden tragedy, detectives have already identified their killers.
They spoke with a lot of the neighbors, including Troy, and they also spoke with a man who saw the couple dragging something down the hall to the dumpster.
Rocky and Laisha can't ignore the commotion outside. And when detectives knock on their door, they're ready for them.
When they were questioned together, they tried to stick to a made-up story that they concocted after they got rid of Emily's body.
But it's a different story at the police station when Rocky doesn't have Laisha to take the lead.
You can tell he was very scared. You could tell he had to really think about his answers after we asked him the question.
Rocky finally admitted to punching and hitting Emily.
I don't want to lose her. Who? Laisha.
So the thought of losing Laisha was too unbearable for him. It was overwhelming, and he was not able to handle those emotions.
When pushed hard enough for the truth, Rocky's loyalty to Laisha comes to an end when he confesses that it was Laisha who cast the final blow.
Rocky tells us that Laisha repeatedly hit Emily over the head with a frying pan several times, and at one point she started using a hammer to Emily's head.
They're both arrested for the murder of Emily Clemens and convicted of second-degree murder. They are each tried as adults, and despite showing remorse at trial, they receive life sentences.
In court, Rocky and Laisha both apologized to Emily's parents. Rocky did admit that he regretted every single moment of killing Emily.
Remorse is all Rocky has left to hold on to after sacrificing his life and everyone in it for love. Rocky Almastica Jr. let lust trap him in the middle of a deadly feud between two women who loved him. 1,500 miles up the East Coast, Jamal Haith falls prey to a woman who uses his greatest weakness to manipulate him. Born and raised in West Baltimore, Maryland, the one thing Jamal Lee Haith knows is that he doesn't want to be like his peers.
Jamal grew up in one of the more rough urban parts of Baltimore where there was a lot of crime and violence and high incarceration rates for young Black men.
The opportunities for employment are very limited, and so it's, significant risk factors for lots of problems that can go wrong.
The son of an electrician copes with the surrounding chaos by focusing on school and doing his best to stay out of trouble.
Jamal may have experienced difficulty in terms of fitting in his environment, and so he probably felt like an outsider trying to go against the grain. So he wanted out. It was just a matter of when and how to get out.
2 years after graduating high school, the 20-year-old gets a glimpse of a better opportunity when he visits some family in a quaint Boston suburb.
So Jamal had an aunt and uncle that live in Massachusetts, and he visited and fell in love with the place. So he decided he would probably have much more opportunity living in Massachusetts.
He takes the plunge and packs his bags when his relatives happily offer him a room in their Brockton home.
What do I think?
As he settles into his new town with a part-time job, he gets much more than he bargains for when he meets knockout 17-year-old Zeno Williams.
Zeno is from Jamaica, and as a young child, she moved to Massachusetts with her family.
Zeno had caramel brown skin and just really somebody that had a lot of confidence and had a spark.
And it doesn't take more than a few dates before the two find true love.
Their relationship got started very quickly, very intensely, so quickly that they actually moved in together.
With Zeno out of work and an endless amount of time together, the couple is in for an unexpected surprise.
So within about a year or so of them getting together, they get pregnant. And for Jamal, this is huge. He really relished the idea of being a father. It was the most important thing to him.
9 months later, the young couple are overjoyed with their new family. But the next 2 years fly by after they have their second baby, altering their once loving relationship into one plagued with crushing anxiety.
They don't have very much money to support the children. He was constantly under the pressure of providing for the family.
The baby is hungry?
Jamal started to become physically violent towards Zeno. There were several incidents of him beating Zeno to the point where she would call the police.
Jamal was probably frustrated, and the only thing that he probably knew how to do to express all those emotions that he was feeling was the violence.
Wanting to keep her family together, Zeno takes mercy on her man until she hits a breaking point one night.
This beating was more severe than all of the other instances up until that point. So Zeno pressed charges against Jamal, and as a result of that, he ended up going to jail.
Hello?
Jamal has tried to be a good person. He's tried to be a good citizen. So to get into this relationship in this new environment, and now he goes to jail, probably ultimately felt like a failure for him.
The year-long sentence begins with a weighty letter from the court, informing him that any attempt to contact Zeno or his kids will land him more jail time.
She decided to take out a restraining order and was granted a 3-year restraining order against Jamal.
So being that he put himself in a situation with his own actions to where he could no longer see his children, Jamal probably felt worthless.
Over the next several months, Zeno moves on with her life, determined never to take Jamal back. The 21-year-old single mom gets a job at a cleaning company, where she begins a heated affair with her boss, 49-year-old Manny Andrade.
Was the client happy today?
He's more than twice her age, and he's very successful.
He's also married, and his wife and children live in Florida. So at the time, he was separated from them.
As their involvement seems to become more serious, the young mom looks forward to their future together.
She got really attracted to the idea that he was financially stable. So that meant that he could provide for her children, also take care of her, and this could perhaps be a long-term situation for her.
For the next 6 months, their budding romance begins to stand the test of time. Meanwhile, after serving his year in jail, Jamal is released, and he's more determined than ever to get on the straight and narrow, hoping someday it will get his family back.
He goes back to live with his aunt and uncle. He decides to really focus on getting his education in order to have more opportunities than he had before.
When isolated in jail, it really lets you know what really matters to you. And so he probably really missed his children and probably made a promise to himself that I'm going to be a better man, I'm going to be a better father.
Over the next 3 months, Jamal gets a job and is still blissfully unaware of Zeno's new relationship as he stays within the bounds of the restraining order. But while his life steadies, Zeno finds out that her seemingly happy romance is nothing more than a meaningless fling.
Okay, thank you so much.
Stop.
Manny reveals to Zeno that he's planning on reconciling with his family and moving down to Florida. He made it very clear to her that his mind was made up and he was indeed going to reconcile with his family and their relationship would be over.
Are you serious? You're lying!
Zeno had a hard time accepting this. Zeno was really enraged when she heard the news that Manny was going back to live with his family.
Heartbreak quickly turns to fury when Zeno can't bring herself to let him go.
She becomes obsessed with the idea of being with him. She feels that she has to do something about it.
She wanted to exact some sort of intense, real revenge against Manny.
Zeno felt as if Manny just kind of discarded her. And it was almost probably the same feeling that she had when she was abused by Jamal. So she wasn't gonna let this situation go down without a fight.
Fixated on making Manny suffer, she knows she can't pull off the violent deed alone.
The first person that came to mind was her ex-boyfriend, Jamal.
But with the legal boundaries, she gets a message to Jamal through his aunt.
So Jamal does get in touch with Zeno and they decide to meet.
2 days later, the ex-lovers go to a mutual friend's house where they can talk.
Zeno, she made Jamal believe that their children were actually in danger.
I need your help.
She tells him that there's a man named Manny who's involved in a drug trade with her family, and he has threatened to kill her and the children.
She knew that he would be willing to do anything to protect his family. So creating this falsehood of Manny being in this drug trade was just a way to get someone else to do the work that she wasn't able to do.
Jamal was absolutely fuming. He was foaming at the mouth. He was totally convinced that Manny was a threat, and the only way for his kids to be safe was for Manny to be taken out.
Zeno has Jamal in the palm of her hands as she tells him that Manny keeps upwards of 30 grand in cash in his apartment that they can use to buy themselves 2 tickets to Jamaica after the murder.
We'll just take the money and go.
That sealed the deal for Jamal. He was convinced that with $30,000 and to be able to provide for his children and possibly to be with Zeno.
And if he had enough money to take care of his family, it would alleviate some of the stress that he was dealing with.
The very next night after dropping her kids off at her mother's house, Jamal and Zeno take the bus 15 miles away to Stoughton, where they intend to kill Manny in his apartment. As the two creep up to Manny's apartment, Zeno stays a few steps behind Jamal.
How's it going, sir? Jamal went to the door, knocked on it, and Manny opened it. And Jamal said he was a maintenance worker. There was a leak downstairs, and he was there to fix it.
So Jamal follows him into the apartment, and right behind him, Zeno is following Jamal. Manny couldn't see Zeno because she was careful to be out of his view.
Read the back, right?
Yeah.
Jamal corners Manny in his bedroom, and he attempts to snap his neck. but he's not able to get enough of a grip.
Manny decides to fight back. Even though Manny is taking quite a beating, he's really fighting for his life.
Jamal beat him very badly, and tries to overtake him. While this is going on, Manny is fighting back.
So Jamal asked Zeno to find him a knife, and she could not find a knife. Instead, she found a screwdriver and brought that to Jamal.
As Manny catches sight of Zeno for the first time, he's even more distraught.
He immediately said, "Why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me?"
But they coldly ignore his cries as Jamal tries to end his life.
Give me the knife.
Jamal takes the screwdriver that Zeno brought him and begins to stab Manny in the ear several times, so much to the point that the screwdriver bends.
Jamal is stabbing Manny multiple times throughout his body. The scene just becomes quite gruesome. There's blood everywhere, all over the floor, all over the walls.
Despite Jamal's merciless attack, Manny is still alive. Then, Zeno watches as her malicious fantasy comes to be.
So Jamal grabs an electrical cord and he strangles him until he dies.
So in his mind, he was doing what he had to do as a father to make sure that his kids were okay. And so he had justified it, and there was no remorse for protecting his family.
Quickly, the murderous duo goes after the money Zeno promised would be there.
Jamal and Zeno rummaged through the apartment, and all they could find was $500 in cash, some credit cards, and they took Manny's cell phone, but there wasn't a large amount of cash that Zeno thought could be there.
But there's no time to react to the small take before they cover their bloody tracks. They immediately think up a plan to get rid of the body by putting it in Manny's own truck and lighting it on fire. But after 2 hours of cleaning the endless blood pools, their plan is interrupted.
So as they're cleaning up and making plans to take the body out, someone knocks at the door. At first, they just ignore it, but this person isn't going away.
The person who was trying to get into the apartment was a woman who worked with Manny.
After seeing his truck is there, she's overly concerned that he isn't responding at their usual meet time. They bolt out of the back door and abandon their plan. They make it a couple of blocks on foot and call a taxi to bring them to a friend's house. As they nervously discuss their next move, Manny's employee is still outside of Manny's apartment.
She calls the police, and the police discovers Manny's body in his bedroom.
She helps identify his battered remains, but she can't hold back her emotion when she calls Manny's wife with the devastating news.
I mean, he was a family man, had children, and they took it very hard.
A team of detectives fans out to catch the killer before he gets too far.
So they knocked on doors and talked to neighbors who had seen Zeno lurking around Manny's apartment. The neighbors were familiar with Zeno, so she was identified as someone who had been there because of her relationship with Manny. They also saw Zeno running off with another man.
Police contact Zeno's parents, who say their description sounds just like her ex-boyfriend, Jamal Haith.
So the police issue a warrant for Jamal and Zeno's arrest, but at this time they don't have any leads on where they are.
Now their faces are on police radar up and down the East Coast. Knowing that their kids are safe with Zeno's mom, they make a run for it.
They throw away their bloody clothes, and then they get on a bus headed south.
But their life on the lam together lasts only a day.
And in Virginia, Zeno started talking to a stranger and started talking about what they had done or saying things about what had happened. And Jamal then got skittish and thought that Zeno was talking too much.
They had a falling out, and when they got to Virginia, Zeno decided to head back to Massachusetts.
Jamal is completely terrified that he's probably going to lose his family. That whole idea of not being able to see his kids again, not being able to see Zeno again, was probably very overwhelming for him.
Jamal is pretty determined at this point to make it to Jamaica.
Low on cash, the 23-year-old fugitive makes a pit stop.
Jamal took a job as a day worker in North Carolina to make extra money.
But he doesn't make it through his shift before his employer recognizes his face from a most wanted post and calls police. State troopers take him by surprise, putting his 3-week journey to an abrupt end. When agents question him, he immediately confesses to murdering Manny Andrade.
So Jamal was really clear and open with police that the only reason why he committed Manny's murder was to protect his children.
He trusted the lie that Zeno told him, and he thought that he was doing what any father would do to protect his family. And he probably wanted them to understand his position because for him, the reality is my family was in danger.
After admitting that Zeno was with him during the attack, the admitted killer is transported back to Massachusetts, where he's charged with first-degree murder. Over the next week, Zeno hides under the radar while a nationwide manhunt ensues. But an unlikely tipster reveals her hiding spot.
Zeno's mother noticed some belongings in the basement of one of the buildings that she owned. So when she noticed that, she called the police. And at that point, Zeno was apprehended.
The 20-year-old maintains her innocence as she's charged with the first-degree murder of Manny Andrade.
Turn around.
Zeno lawyers up, refusing to answer any questions with police. At her trial, she tries to divert the blame, using Jamal's violent history as proof that he killed Manny.
She says that he was jealous and that he wanted Manny dead.
Jamal is stung with regret as he finds out about Zeno's lies and that she was merely seeking revenge on a man who broke up with her just 3 days before they killed him.
He was shocked when he found out what Zeno had done. Naturally, this leaves Jamal feeling very manipulated and very betrayed.
Both Jamal Haith and Zeno Williams are convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. And while Manny's wife and kids mourn their enormous loss, Jamal steps up to make peace.
Jamal apologized numerous times during the trial to Manny's family for having killed him.
As Jamal fulfills his sentence, he has countless years to think about what he sacrificed for the woman he couldn't turn down.
Jamal lost everything that mattered to him. Jamal lost the opportunity to be the father that he always wanted. The children, in this case, lost both parents. And unfortunately for them, the only kind of relationship that they'll be able to have with them is one behind bars.
Even though Jamal was abusive towards Zeno, he never actually wanted to disrupt or separate his family. And so when Zeno came to him asking for this, you can imagine that he wanted to do whatever he could to protect her and to protect their kids.
Jamal was gullible, so because of that, he never even thought to question her. So he risked